Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the next session of the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference. I'm Amy Peltier, the Coalition and Advocacy Director here at the Partnership for Strong Communities. This year, the Connecticut Affordable Housing Conference is here for housing. It's our opportunity to convene, collaborate, and drive meaningful change to improve and expand housing affordability, creation, choice, and stability across our state. You can join the conversation at hashtag CAHC 2024, excuse me, across social media. This session is entitled Housing Choice and the Mobility Continuum. I'm going to take a second here and share my screen. We would like to thank our presenting sponsor, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. Thank you to our visionary sponsor, Wells Fargo. Thank you to our champion sponsors, the Connecticut Department of Housing, J. DeMilla and Associates, Trinity Financial, Liberty Bank, Robinson and Cole, and Cohn Resnick. Thank you to all of our foundation sponsors. And thank you to our featured sponsor, the Connecticut Housing and Finance Authority. These sponsors' deep support helps us make the conference happen each year and keep it free for everyone to attend. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that you all know these sessions are being recorded. Please remain on mute unless you're asked to unmute and engage in the conversation. If you have a technology issue, please select the chat icon in the Zoom control panel and send it to the chat with your name, and we'll do our best to assist you. Your speakers will let you know how they want content and questions submitted to them. And post-session, you can complete a feedback survey by clicking on the megaphone icon in the lobby. And we really appreciate your feedback. This session, as I mentioned, is titled Housing and the Mobility Continuum. It will explain what choice looks like in a state where finding safe, quality, affordable housing can be a significant challenge, and discuss what resources and opportunities exist for folks looking to either relocate or to stay in their current community. At last year's conference, the keynote speaker, Majora Carter, discussed how we may not need to leave our communities to be in a better one. With much of the state's affordable housing stock located in areas of concentrated poverty, what resources are available to those who wish to relocate? Conversely, what opportunities exist for those who want to stay in their communities but are still struggling with housing affordability and finding opportunity? In this session, we'll explore the innovative approaches of several organizations who are addressing the ideas of housing choice and mobility along a continuum. Now I'll turn it over to Marcus Smith, Director of Research, Marketing, and Outreach for the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority. Marcus will moderate and introduce the rest of our panels.
When it comes to mobility and maybe some of the challenges or the insights that you've developed early on.
Thank you so much. So my name is Latoya Mills, and at Elm City, just to give you just a little idea, we serve over 6,300 households, a little bit over 14,000 individuals, where 75% of our families are considered extremely low income. So that just gives you kind of an idea of the population that I work with. But mobility to the residents that we serve, it's a variety of things. It's education, access to preschool, to college, secondary school, digital access. It's work, employment, wages, opportunities. It's healthy environment, prenatal, safety from trauma, and it's government, like safety from crime, policing, being in a safe neighborhood. We took this opportunity with applying for this grant because we work in a community where there's a lot of different organizations that provide similar assistance with residents, but we're not all talking. So for example, they would come to housing authority for some things, and then they would go to down the street to I'll choose you, Andrew, to Andrew for something else. And the two sectors weren't talking, and people would get frustrated. They would feel hopeless. And we just wanted to engage with an organization and get assistance, kind of building the community together so that we can come together. There's a quote that they say, it takes a village. And this is where we really wanted to really hone on to and provide all of our resources as a community in Haven to make it easy access for our residents with less stress for our families, for our youth, for our elderly and our seniors. So that's kind of the things that the reasons why we went into urban, why we wanted to do this grant, where we're so happy to get it, and the need that we found with our residents. Thank you.
Yeah, that's excellent. So over to you, Andrew. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what Urban's getting up to in the mobility space?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll give you a second to put up the
Yeah.
slides. But yeah, I really just appreciate you, Marcus and Latoya, for the kind introduction. It's great to be here with everyone and excited to share Urban's upper mobility framework and tools with this audience. If you go to the next slide, I just want to highlight, what Latoya was speaking about is kind of utilizing our framework. And so what I'm hopeful is that in the same way that it has helped serve as some common grounding for the New Haven team led by Elm City Communities, that by sharing the framework here today, it'll help spark some interest in using Urban's upper mobility framework, our metrics and other tools to really mobilize your partners across this mission of ensuring that all people live in communities that enable and advance their economic well-being, as well as their power and autonomy and their dignity and belonging. In the next slide, I just wanted to preview a few goals for the conversation. I know we don't have a lot of time together, but in our time, I am planning to just provide an overview of the upper mobility framework and mobility metrics, dig into what they mean. But then I also want to make sure I have some space to talk about how partners are using these resources and just share some findings more broadly about our work on mobility. But before I dig into the framework in more detail, I wanted to share some history and context for this work. So if you go to the next slide, and even one more, the upper mobility framework first emerged out of this previous initiative, the U.S. Partnership on Mobility from Poverty. And it convened a series of stakeholders that ranged cross-sector leaders across the research community, the nonprofit service providers and advocates, the faith community, philanthropy, and a range of other community stakeholders to investigate what would it take to dramatically increase mobility from poverty. On the next slide, the key finding of this group's research and analysis is that true mobility is about more than just economic success. To move out and stay out of poverty, people also need to feel that they have power and autonomy in their lives, which is the ability to make choices and influence actions that can affect their future, as well as feel a sense of belonging and dignity in their community. This holistic concept of upward mobility is what we refer to as the three-part definition of mobility from poverty, empowers the rest of our mobility framework. And the power of this definition is that it really pushes us to understand and value the impact of different community conditions on all three aspects of mobility and put them on equal footing when making decisions. For example, housing policies should aim to strike a balance between supporting access to affordable housing as a key component to economic stability and success, but we also need to consider policies that help people make choices about their housing conditions and location, because where someone lives and having choice in that important decision can be critical to maintaining social connections that have a big impact on our lives. So to the next slide, this is a kind of a good transition to our upward mobility framework, which you'll see on the screen here in a moment. And underneath the three-part definition, we see 5 interconnecting pillars that represent key areas of support that people need to achieve mobility, as well as 24 predictors that are underneath each of those pillars to understand and measure the conditions that lead to upward mobility. And on the next slide, I'll start to unpack the framework a bit further. But before I do, I just wanted to take a moment to highlight the banner that runs across our framework, which reads that racial equity is necessary for all people and communities to prosper, especially those who have been excluded by structural inequities. And at Urban, we cannot stress enough that this work cannot be successful without this focus on equity and addressing the systemic barriers that have resulted from and are perpetuated by racist beliefs, norms, policies, and practices that have really produced the deep and persistent inequities that we see today. So under the three-part definition and the focus on racial equity, again, you see these 5 interconnected pillars, which include rewarding work, high quality education, opportunity-rich and inclusive neighborhoods, healthy environment and access to good health care, and responsive and just governance, which are all aspects that Latoya referenced at the beginning. And within each of these pillars is a set of key predictors of mobility from poverty, which essentially are the evidence-based factors that we know are strongly associated with long-term economic success, power and autonomy, and dignity and belonging. If you go to the next slide, you can see a little bit of a zoomed in look. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into all of these predictors, but we'll drop some links in the chat, and I encourage everyone to take a closer look at our website. However, to show how leaders can engage with these predictors, I wanted to focus on the 2 that are most directly linked to housing affordability and housing stability. So if we go to the next slide, I'll zoom in quickly. And from our research, we know that access to stable, affordable housing is foundational for long-term social and economic success. And conversely, we know that housing instability can contribute to a range of short, medium, and long-term consequences. Because of the clear evidence, there's also some policy interventions that local leaders can look to as promising ways to improve local conditions that are spotlighted by these predictors. So I've pulled out a couple of examples on the slides here, including different policy levers to increase the overall supply of housing through like zoning and land use reform, which can positively impact housing affordability, but also tenant protection policies and programs that can stabilize housing for renters. When you go on our website, you'll have the opportunity to dig in a little bit deeper into both the evidence that supports these predictors, as well as the promising interventions that are being tested and used across communities. But to make these predictors more useful, Urban developed a set of mobility metrics. So if we jump to the next slide, you can see a sampling of some of these different measures that are really just the best proxies that we could come up with and are tested and vetted for measuring local conditions of mobility. For example, you can see in the middle of the page, we measure housing affordability by counting the number of housing units that are affordable and available for every 100 households with low, very low, and extremely low incomes. And we also try to disaggregate the data wherever possible. So in housing affordability, we disaggregate by renters and owners to give a better sense of what the landscape looks like. And if we go to the next slide, it just digs in that the mobility metrics effectively create a snapshot of local mobility conditions under each of the 24 predictors and can be used across every county and more than 480 cities in the US. And people can use these metrics to both understand the conditions in their communities, to contextualize those conditions by looking at regional and national trends, and establish priorities and mobilize action for change within their community. Each metric also offers the opportunity to compare those conditions both between communities and within communities over time to monitor progress. Again, I won't be able to spend too much time, but you can find all of these metrics and data on Urban's upward mobility data dashboard, which we'll link in the chat. And on that page, you'll find a user guide that's built into the dashboard, an FAQ page, as well as a recorded webinar, which provides a tutorial and some explanation on how to use the data dashboard. Okay, we'll take it to the next slide. And I know that that was a very, very quick tour, but hopefully a good sampling. But I wanted, just before I end, to highlight how communities are using the framework and metrics, because they're really just intended to be a starting point for communities. And, in particular, we see the framework and metrics as being a useful way to surface insights and start conversations about mobility conditions and challenges from this common grounding in the evidence and common language that can help facilitate meaningful dialogue. But this is really just the first step in pursuing change. Some of the other steps that are really important include building a fuller picture of mobility conditions by kind of engaging and collecting local data, and then engaging other members of the community. And all those actions that were on the screen are really derived from Urban's planning guide for local change, which offers step-by-step guidance on making and implementing mobility action plans. So again, just preview that. We'll share a link in the chat to explore further. And then on the next page, I just want to highlight the importance of the roles of all community stakeholders in pursuing upward mobility. As Latoya mentioned, it takes a village. Because changing mobility conditions is systems change work, you really need partners that are committed to a shared vision of change, and that can make a plan together for how collective actions will help support progress. So within that planning guide that I mentioned a moment ago, there are a number of companion resources that will help you identify key stakeholders in your community, understand how they can contribute to local mobility work, and ultimately also help you all build a coalition across government, nonprofits, the business community, and other kinds of community partners that all have a role to play. And this is the basis of the work that Urban's been doing with Latoya and Elm City communities as they've participated in the Mobility Action Learning Network to really build a stronger coalition to address local challenges. So on the next slide, again, I'll let Latoya speak a little bit more about how Elm City Communities is building a cross-sector coalition in New Haven, but I just wanted to emphasize again that creating and sustaining the conditions for boosting people out of poverty requires an all hands on deck approach. So building a strong coalition is a critical element of this work. And if you're interested, I really encourage you to check out the range of resources that we've developed to focus on that element. On the next slide, I'll just highlight that to help communities take action on the insights from the Upward Mobility Framework, Urban has provided direct technical assistance to 34 communities now, selected through 2 different competitive application processes. The first was a group of 8 communities that engaged in an 18-month mobility action planning process. And then the second is the Mobility Action Learning Network, which I'll share a link to, but engaged with communities like New Haven that wanted to engage and receive support building kind of capacity in one of 4 learning tracks that were most aligned with their needs and goals. And so those tracks are using data for decision making, building coalitions for systems change, empowering community partners, and measuring impact. And we'll have resources on all of those things to dig into and engage with later. Because we've really been using these TA experiences also to develop and test new tools, document lessons learned, and create new public goods to help any community leverage the upward mobility framework and metrics. Finally, I just wanted to end by highlighting a community from the first round of technical assistance, Boone County, Missouri, and share some of the exciting actions that they're taking as a community to promote increased access to affordable housing. So as I mentioned earlier, the metrics can be really used as a powerful tool to prioritize your work. And then this is especially true and powerful when it's paired with community engaged methods that bring residents into the planning process to help set priorities based on what matters to them. So Boone County went through a series of data walks and planning engagements with their community that led to a focus on 3 areas, including fair and inclusive housing. And under the fair and inclusive housing focus, they've actually narrowed in on supporting increased affordable housing and second chance leasing. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that Boone County actually launched an affordable housing coalition with many of the partners that I talked about earlier. And some of the strategies that they're pursuing included creating a housing trust fund for Boone County to both make new investments and preserve affordable housing, to engage in a promotion campaign to increase awareness of alternative home financing programs and opportunities, as well as complete a housing market study to understand where the greatest gaps and barriers are and to inform new investments. I'll share links to their website and Mobility Action Plan as well. But just wanted to share what this kind of looks like at the end down the line. So again, I know that this is quick and I want to, pass the mic to Latoya, but I wanted to first just end by providing an overview of some other resources. So first is our project website. This is where you can access the framework, the mobility metrics, the data dashboard, the planning guide for local action, and our evidence resource library. You can also subscribe to get on our mailing list and learn about new resources that are coming out, trainings, and TA opportunities. But there's also some other great research and resources from the field, including Results for America's Economic Mobility Catalog, which offers a range of case studies and research on communities that are implementing policy interventions to boost mobility. And then NACO's Economic Mobility Resource Hub, which has a range of policy recommendations and interventions to help local leaders identify what policies might support their efforts. And then many of you may or may not be familiar with Opportunity Insights, but they've done some comprehensive research on which communities are promoting or hindering economic mobility. They've been really pioneering, this notion that place matters and neighborhoods matter. So we'll share a link to the Opportunity Atlas to explore that data and research. But for now, I just want to say thank you again for having me. And I'm excited to, hand the mic back to Marcus and to Latoya so that Latoya can share more about the work that she's leading in New Haven. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, for that. Appreciate it. So Latoya, as Andrew alluded to, Elm Cities has been doing some of the work with the Upward Mobility Initiative and the framework. What's that experience for you so far?
So far, the experience has been nothing but great. It really held the Housing Authority accountable for, and other organizations accountable for coming together and doing this work. We all get busy, things happen, and all get indulged into our day-to-day, but it really held us accountable into doing this work. So when we first applied for the upward mobility framework, we actually included and spoke to some of our partners that we work with but don't really work with. So some of them included the City of New Haven. We needed the government entity to make changes, to make moves. Workforce Alliance, again, that employment piece, we needed that in there. We also needed a community action of Greater New Haven because we're doing some similar work. And we also partnered with United Way on this of Greater New Haven. We set a goal as organizations, as a community, and our goal was to make New Haven an affordable city to live. And we know that the majority of our residents in New Haven, not in housing, but outside of housing, pay more than 30% on their rent. The average rent here for a 1-bedroom is around $2,400 or more. So, and that's really impactful for a family. Another goal that we really wanted to target was our youth homeless population. That one hit hard for me because and I'm going to say our babies, because I believe that our babies should not have to deal with not having a warm place to go to, not having a home to go to. And with all of our organizations, it just made sense. Why not target our youth, our future? So that's two things that we wanted to focus on, is making New Haven an affordable city to live for all, and target our youth homeless population. So we met with the framework, with the help of the framework, the organizations and Urban actually met on a monthly basis. But what we did is we kind of did a timeline for ourselves. So we first sat down with the organizations and we said, what are your goals? What are your missions? We wanted to make sure that we truly understood the organizations that we were sitting down with. And this is just a start. This is by far, we definitely will and have to invite other organizations to the table. But for the core group, we really wanted to find out what is your core value in your organization. We wanted to make sure that we are on the same page. We have the same goal. And then we wanted to, we took the coalition members and we created a theory of change, a strategic action plan. How are we going to do this? How are we going to execute it? What MOUs do you have? What MOUs do you have? How could we bring this together without recreating the wheel? And then we wanted to, then we looked at analyzing the root cause of the housing affordability in New Haven and identify those focus areas. With that and the assistance from Urban, we built out a theory of change based on the root causes in our analysis. And then we started linking. We started linking goals and outcomes and strategies, and we started to build it together. If you could just think of a tent, you need the strong pole in the middle, and then you need strong poles on the side to keep it up. So we started to think about who we wanted to pull in. And then we had decided on a strategic action plan based on our theory of change and determine evaluation methods. How are we going to see if this would even work or not work? How are we going to get that data? And right now, we're actually in the planning process of writing our strategic plan, publishing it, so that we have a reference document for any new coming coalitions. We wanted, before we invited folks, we wanted to be able to have a ground-based level work so that we can get the buy-in of different organizations. And that's kind of where we are now with the planning process. And some lessons that we learned is that you have to stay on it. With Urban's assistance, we have to meet monthly. We have those schedules already on the calendar. Everyone is busy. And we make it a working progress throughout. In between, we have tasks, we have goals. Hope I answered your question, but it's just an ongoing process. And this is just the beginning. We have not even really started to work yet. And when I say the work is really going out there and impacting families, it's planning and bringing organizations together. And when I say work, I mean going out there and really making differences. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that, Latoya, and I think it just speaks to the level of commitment that cities has, but also like you said, the work that goes into kind of the foundational stuff that needs to happen in order to drive impact forward, and not just kind of do this one-off thing and not see if it leads to the changes you're looking for. So now for something a little bit different, I'm going to go over to Evelyn. So CHFA, a lot of folks don't know, we do have a pretty intimate relationship with a lot of organizations that are working on this, at the ground level, helping folks better understand their finances and help maybe transition them into a more optimal housing situations. So Evelyn, why don't you kind of walk through what CHFA gets up to around mobility and that sort of thing. In a second, I'm going to share the slides here again. There we go. Okay.
Evelyn, you're on mute still.
Thank you, Marcus, for the introduction. Thanks, everyone. I'm so happy to be here to share what's happening in CHFA's world. And in the PowerPoint is pretty much will speak for itself. We definitely have some commitments to follow through, and we have plenty of observations that we have made throughout the years that we have invested with our partnering housing counseling agencies. And just to kind of give you a quick background about that, since the mid-1900s, CHFA has been administering and the program through the support of the agencies, and the agencies themselves provide the services that we continually support financially and provide technical support for them. And in the areas that they are providing the support, as it involves the education and counseling, whether it's for rental counseling, rental education, foreclosure prevention, budgeting, financial management. It's a slew of services that a lot of the families throughout the state of Connecticut are in need of, right? So the agencies are pretty busy out there marketing the service and making sure that they're helping the families that are in need. So CHFA has been in partners with these agencies for a long time, and I am proud to be a part of that collaboration, the support of partnering with these agencies. I too came from the How to Improve Counseling world, so I know a lot of the aspect of what's going on a day-to-day basis with these agencies. So with that in mind, just wanted to let you know that the goal of CHFA's housing counseling program is pretty much to promote and maintain residency and home ownership throughout the state of Connecticut. And it pretty much aligns with our mission. And we continue to, like I said, support that. But I also wanted to bring out the fact that as we're committing to evolve, because as Andrew mentioned and Latoya, there's a lot of changes that we have to learn to adjust, and making sure that we are addressing such barriers, whether it's racial inequity, whatever type of financial barriers that families are being faced with. But with the commitment for us to evolve, the observation that we have recognized, and the impacts that's being created by these agencies, we understand that there's a need, right? There's the need to support this choice-based mobility and coming up with some housing strategies. And we are for that. And it's all about helping residents make the decisions and outcomes on what that's going to look like for them. So that's where we are, to make sure that our position is to support the agencies who are on the front end. They're the front end who see these clients, diverse families on a day-to-day basis. And I can say they have plenty of testimonials to share of different clients and their aspect of life and the challenges that they're being faced with. But I just wanted to kind of focus on the next two slides so I can briefly elaborate 3 out of the 6 positive impacts for which the counseling agencies throughout the state of Connecticut are pretty much helping families on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. So as you can see, it talks about the informed financial decisions, the improved affordability through credit education, enhance awareness of local resources and programs. The two that I want to focus on is the informed financial decisions. CHFA have supported counseling help in line of what they're providing. This type of informed information empowers residents to navigate, complex financial choices. The economy that we live in today not going to get any better, in my opinion, but they need that education. They need that information, if you will, and resources as to how to delegate those type of decisions, hard decisions. And also this information also helps them to make and navigate complex financial choices, avoid predatory lending, and also have access, accessible, affordable options. And as a result of all this, the individuals successfully purchased homes within their means. They're able to understand the direct impact that it can help them and to decide what that mobility means for them, short and long term. The other thing I wanted to make emphasis on is the enhanced awareness in the counseling sessions on a day-to-day. And the counseling sessions involves a lot of information that is introduced to the residents. They talk about locally or within the area of how they can obtain access to the different resources. This information or this program the counselors helps them to seek apartments that are affordable for them. They help with information on down payment. They are encouraged to visit our CHFA website because our website has a slew of information about first-time home buyers program and foreclosure prevention. So again, when I mentioned about the counselors being in the forefront, they have to be sure that they're readily available to provide these enhanced resources. It's going to help these clients or families understand what does long-term financial stability looks for them and where can they reside, whether it's being a tenant for life or being a homeownership in a homeownership field. The next slide, please. I also wanted to focus on, and I remember Andrew touched on the racial inequity. As required by HUD, the United States Department of Housing Development, the counseling agencies follow HUD guidance. And one of the things they focus on in the counseling session is to talk about fair housing and how crucial of a topic that is, so that every family can understand their rights. Okay, so that part of the session is being explored and provide different examples and how to address them. If they are running to some kind of a racial discrimination, how can they go about addressing it? And it goes hand in hand with the enhanced resources that the agencies are prepared to provide for them. So that's another important practice that the agencies needs to follow. And we have certified counseling agencies. And just to let you know, currently there's 12 HUD-approved counseling agencies in the state of Connecticut, very busy doing their work day to day. And I'm behind the scenes trying to figure out what's happening in their world, what's working, what's not working. And I always love to hear their best practices and how they're actually helping the community at large. The other part I wanted to share, which is important, is the support in navigating rental and ownership options. The reason why I feel that's important, because in support of that option, this applies to individuals that are undecided. They don't know if they're going to want to rent or if they want to buy a house. They're just in the middle. And again, they need that guidance. So the counselors are providing the pros and cons of what that will look like for them to make that decision on what type of different circumstances that they're faced with. But as a result of this type of navigation, residents are more likely to make better decisions aligned with their long-term goals and financial stability, leading to improved housing security. So that's the thing here. They want to know what area they can go to that they're going to feel safe on a long-term basis. And just to know that our partner counseling agencies have many, many positive impacts. This is just 6 of the many, right? And just to know that on a day-to-day, both our partnering counseling agencies and CHFA we recognize how, and I'm sure we can all agree that it's very easy, or it's surely agreeable to identify successful homeowners stems from successful renters. And that all comes from the information and the resources that these clients have received from the housing counseling agencies. And I want to kind of give recognition to them for doing that. So in efforts and in our efforts, in our CHFA efforts for the mobility counseling, CHFA is planning to initiate a more holistic approach to facilitate a greater housing choice for the agencies, even though we know that we're facing a lot of limited housing stock that we are currently faced with. But we're trying to see what type of navigation services that we can initiate. So we're in the process of trying to provide residents with those skills and resources that they need to be well informed. And again, utilizing the collaboration of our agencies. So with the collaboration that I just mentioned here in the next slide, it talks about the challenges that the agencies are faced. And we see those challenges because they informed of that. But there's going to be, just to have you know, that there's three type of approaches in how to address these challenges. And it talks about the community education advocacy, the policy innovation, and resource leverage. For one of them that stood out for me is the part about raising awareness, right? About health implications for those that are living in unstable homes, public, whether they're living in public housing or political support for expanded housing access. So raising awareness of what's happening and how the individuals can gain access to that. In terms of the cross-sector collaboration, I can say as one example, the Urban League of Greater Hartford, I'm sorry, the Urban League of Southern Connecticut, they're located in Stamford. They currently have a great supporting system. They collaborated with Yale School of Medicine. And what's intriguing about this type of collaboration is that how they instrumentally gather together to reframe the housing stability and trying to figure out how that looks like and what type of access of data they can obtain. And the purpose of this collaboration is to advocate for policies that reduce together the insecurity and improve community well-being. So imagine that, the Urban League of Southern Connecticut joining forces with Yale Medicine because they have a lot to share and help the neighborhoods. And some of the things that they're trying to work on is they're trying to focus on dismantling the barrier. Okay, it says here neighborhood disinvestment, discriminatory housing practices, and inadequate transportation that the disproportionate affect communities of color. So there's another barrier that they recognize that needs to be addressed. So how I'm proud that they are able to make that collaboration work for them and for the community at large. Ultimately, these efforts work toward the creating of pathways of poverty, improving health and outcomes. This is what collaboration is all about, right? We want to make sure that CHFA plays that role and follow that same mission that they're trying to follow, and that's to provide and to provide, right, that safe and stable home for many throughout the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Evelyn. Yeah, just reminding folks, if you have any questions for our panelists, if you want to join the conversation, just jump in the chat. We have just a couple of minutes left here. I think a question that I've had, and I know we've talked about as a group as we're getting ready for this call, is mobility itself. And maybe for LaToya, how have you, as you're kind of building this initiative in New Haven, how are you? You've talked about the rising costs of housing in New Haven. How are you balancing this idea that mobility is a geographic thing, like it's actually moving from someplace, maybe moving out of New Haven to another place, kind of pursuing as quote unquote opportunity, versus mobility within your own community. It's not necessarily place-based. It's more about you and your family and your family's needs. So what does that look like in terms of like that balance or that conversation?
Well, with our residents, it's two different ones, because in a lot of communities, we're finding that there's a lot of barriers that residents are faced with. Food is one of them, food barrier. There's no local grocery store. There's high price, small markets where folks can't get fresh fruit. It's hard to get fresh apples, fresh oranges. It's so expensive. Our school systems. In New Haven, depending on where you live, your student your student can go to one school across town and another school the other side of town. We were just faced with a mom who had 3 kids, 3 different schools, conference nights, all the same night, same time. How could one mom make it across town to 3 different schools, 3 different conferences to hear about her child? Transportation is another barrier that we see. It's just obviously a lot of moving outside of New Haven versus inside, where you may be on a bus line versus not on a bus line. So that kind of cuts down the choice that while some people may not move out. Banking, just the understanding of banking, and of course housing stock. I even see that it's more expensive to move and better school system areas. You may have a house, maybe 200,000. The same house, maybe even smaller, could be 400,000 in a different area, what they consider better area. And credit scores, and just bringing the education to our residents of the importance of credit scores and helping them get there. So we have a program, FSS, where we have family self-sufficiency, where we help our residents work on their credit scores, pay off things, because when you go into the market, we don't want, because of your credit score, because of the cost, we don't want any barriers for you to have. You should be able to look at any home you want in any area you want without any barriers. So we really push to help our residents with credit scores and get it ready for home ownership if that's their goal. And just really working with residents that want to stay in the area because they want to stay around family. So we find that too. Some people want to stay in the same area because, maybe mom is helping them out with their children after school. Maybe they're, closer to family, but then some families just want a different life for their children. They want a different life for themselves. So we really work with each individual person. And that's why we're trying to really work with our community members to really set up the goals, and why this is so important for us to collab is to set up these goals, set up these foundation. That's what I'm going to use the word foundation for our families, so that whatever and wherever they want to go, that they have that foundation where they can just fly and they can go. Being in housing is not, we don't look at it as, oh boy, you're in housing, woe is you. No, it's a stepping stone. We want you to look at this as a stepping stone, and we want you to say, you know what, I'm here, this is helpful. Let me get all of the information I want. I tell every resident, come on now, pick my brain. You didn't ask enough questions. Ask more questions, ask more. And their children too. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? No, let's look for scholarships. No, let's go to the school. No, mom, if you can't go, I'll go with you. Let's help, let's ask these questions. And we really want to set up folks and families for excellence. And I hope I answered that question, but it really varies. It depends on the family. But regardless, we want to set them up.
No, that was perfect. Oh yeah, that was well said. I think it's a great way to end our conversation. And mobility really is, it's a personal choice. It comes down to that, each individual case, but building that initiative and building that network to support people where they're at and where they want to go is really the name of the game. So appreciate Evelyn and Andrew for joining us today, and for everybody else sticking with us for the conversation, and to Amy and the partnership again for making space for our talk today. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.